Hi, everyone. I'm Joseph Macchio.
And I'm Stephen Macchio.
Welcome to episode 3 of our teachings of the Ascended Masters on fallen angels, Nephilim, and UFOs. And again, the subtitle is Birds of a Feather Flock Together.
Oh, goodness.
We'll see.
They
we'll
certainly
see
do
how
flock
that
together.
works later on.
Now, I think at the end of episode 2, we had just played a little excerpt from the movie Star Wars,
Yes.
where General Palpatine was talking with Skywalker, Anakin Skywalker. And I had mentioned that the fallen angels could sometimes manipulate karma. And I think in that particular scene, you saw where the brilliant mind, the intellectualism of Palpatine was able to sway and interfere with the free will, thus interfering perhaps with what was the karma that Anakin had. You know, what was he really supposed to do? And then you have this brilliant mind changing it just enough so he was going to do what he wanted him to do.
Exactly.
And that's what we mean about the manipulation of, someone's individual karma.
And of course, that individual karma also manifests as a certain, within Anakin anyway, vulnerability.
Yes.
The fear of the death of his mother.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a manipulation.
Right. And his argument
it's
is
still
brilliant.
The same manipulation, the vulnerability of a person.
Right. Right. And his use of human intellectualism was brilliant because he had an answer for everything.
Yeah.
Now, I think we were going to move on a little bit in episode 3 here, and I believe that you were going to bring up something about Hebrew scriptures.
Yes, we want to start with the Hebrew scriptures because this is about the fallen angels, who they are, where they are specifically, but we have to have some kind of a starting point. And there's no better starting point than the book of Isaiah, copies of which were found at Qumran. You can actually see the book of Isaiah if you go to Jerusalem because they have the whole thing of Qumran.
I got to go all the way to Jerusalem?
You got to go all the way to Jerusalem.
To Qumran?
Yeah.
Just to see
I'll come with you.
All right. Well, I'll have to set that.
So the book of Isaiah, quoting now, Isaiah 14, 12 to 18. Listen to this. How did you come to fall from the heavens, day star, son of dawn? How did you come to be thrown to the ground, you who enslaved the nations? You who used to think to yourself, I will climb up to the heavens, and higher than the stars of God, I will set my throne. I will rival the Most High. What? Now you have fallen to Sheol, to the very bottom of the abyss. All who see you will gaze at you, will stare at you. Is this the man who made the earth tremble and overthrew kingdoms, who made the world a desert and leveled cities? This translation is from the Jerusalem Bible. So the Hebrew name for this individual, which is translated in English as day star, son of dawn, is Hallel ben Shahar. Now in English, that is shining one, son of the morning. So who is day star, son of dawn? If you go back to the Latin Vulgate, you get the name Lucifer or light bringer. But interestingly enough, that's also the name of the planet Venus. So the Hebrew also relates to the planet Venus, as does the English.
So this is why I've always thought it was important to go back to original languages that these things were written in.
Yes.
Hebrew, Latin, Greek. You got to sometimes go to the root and then come forward and see really what you're talking about. So it relates to the planet Venus.
The King James Version, for instance, will use the term Lucifer. So in the later centuries, if you remember, a lot of the so-called church fathers and the scholars had a consensus whereby they said this prideful individual was none other than an archangel who actually had rebelled against the, quote, Most High.
Right.
So the Ascended Masters have revealed to us that, yes, it was an archangel, that this Lucifer, this Hillel ben Shahar, was actually of archangelic level, but he was not in the ascended state.
So this is a very, very important point.
Very important point.
Because most people, or a good amount of people, would believe that once you've made it to heaven, or if you were already in heaven, as the angels and archangels are thought to be, how could you possibly fall?
Exactly.
See, so
that's the question.
The idea that an angel has a slightly different kind of free will is an important point.
Yeah, you will
So-
go into that. Yeah.
You know, we make free will choices,
Yeah.
and an angel is
Yeah.
slightly different in that they carry out the free will of who they're working under, who their hierarchs are.
That's a very interesting point. The free will of angels is different, therefore, than the free will of man.
Right, right. So, you know, that understanding
Yeah.
helps one understand as to when in heaven, why would you even consider rebellion when everyone here on earth is trying to get there? They're trying to get to heaven, thinking
Right.
that everything is going to be okay
Right.
once you get there. Now, what you were saying about, you know, that free will, I think the law, you know, there's a certain cosmic laws that play on these situations whereby an angel, if they go against carrying out the will,
Yeah.
then if they rebel against that will,
Yes.
then cosmic law forces them to have to embody,
That's the point.
right, on the earth and go through the rounds of rebirth,
Or any other planet. For that
Or any
matter.
other
They
planet.
have to be in the physical plane.
right? Because rebellion is of a different order than
Yes.
occasionally making a mistake whereby the angel could be repolarized back to, because
Yeah.
they're carrying out orders in a way,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So that helps maybe clarify, and that is, you know, an ascended master teaching
How could that
how
happen?
that can happen,
Yeah.
right?
And again, the very
Right.
important point that this archangel Lucifer was not in the ascended state.
Right.
So in our passage, he rivals the Most High. And, you know, who is the Most High? It is the hierarch under which Lucifer is working. In Hebrew, the Most High, incidentally, is El Elyon. E-L-E-L-Y-O-N. El Elyon. And that statement of Lucifer's is also similar to a statement in the Bhagavad Gita when Krishna is talking about the difference between the so-called demonic and the light personalities, the Asuras, A-S-U-R-A-S, which we will be discussing, are the ones who are, let us say, the fallen ones. And these Asuras in the Bhagavad Gita, chapter 16, say, I am the Lord, Ishvara. I am the Lord. Basically, it's saying the same thing that Lucifer did. Not because you became the Lord, your higher self, but you are now a separate entity rivaling the powers and authority of your hierarch, God.
Right. And as we go forward in these episodes and the ones to come, we're going to see that this thread is throughout all of the major religions.
Yes.
This thread of the idea of someone or groups of individuals rebelling against their hierarchs or their overseers, or you could use the term God if you want.
Yes, you could. You could. So again, what does Lucifer say in this passage? That he will set up his throne up in the heavens. So this son of dawn wound up on earth, and this is very clearly stated, as a king or a ruthless conqueror, which is very interesting because you don't usually attribute someone like Lucifer as being on the earth as a character.
Right.
You usually think, well, he's somewhere down in hell,
Right. Wherever that is.
wherever that is, and he's going to, stay down there supposedly. So, but this passage, and people don't really read this clearly, because what they've done is they've whitewashed it and reinterpreted it to say something else other than what it actually
it
says.
Clearly states, is this the man?
Is this the man?
Right.
So the son of dawn wound up on earth as a king. First, however, he was cast into Sheol. Well, what is Sheol? Greek, Hades, English, hell. But Lucifer didn't stay there.
Right. See,
he doesn't stay.
There's gigantic assumptions made that if you're put somewhere, you have to stay there.
Yes. For eternity, maybe.
Right. Now, I think some people would interpret hell to be the astral plane or various levels of it. I think that's a term that most people know of.
Yes, in esoteric studies.
Right.
The astral plane.
But when someone is in the astral plane, there is nothing said about that you're remanded there and therefore you can never get out of it.
Right.
But the fact that you can move from the astral plane to the earth plane, you may not have any longer entree to the higher realms, and that's where you get the casting out from.
Yes.
And we'll get to that.
Yeah, we're going to get to that.
To those lines about casting out.
Yeah.
So go ahead, continue what you were saying about he's being a king.
Well, he didn't stay there, and so obviously, if he didn't stay there, where did he go? So he went, took birth in the flesh. Since again, as you mentioned, he's called the man. So here we come with the revelation of the Ascended Masters that kind of opens up the story according to the Akashic records. The Ascended Masters actually teach that Lucifer took birth as King Nebuchadnezzar of Babylon, considering the time frame when this book of Isaiah was written. So this is something which is a revelation.
This is huge, because when you read what he does and what he's about and all of the things that King Nebuchadnezzar does, and you realize now what his motives are.
Yeah.
You realize that you have someone worse than a General Palpatine in embodiment. And things are not going to go well.
Yeah. The emperor,
they're not going to go well under King Nebuchadnezzar.
Yeah. And if you read about King Nebuchadnezzar, it's very interesting because he, at the end, feigns holiness but he also goes around eating grass and goes back to an animal level. And that's a whole other story. We're not going to get into that right now, but, it just shows that this Nebuchadnezzar is not, quote, an ordinary king.
Right. And the important thing that they don't have to be like totally evil, so evil that it's obvious to everyone.
Right.
They can play both sides of the coin when they're in embodiment.
Right.
They could be as nice, they could be evil, or they could be worse.
No one will be any the wiser.
No, they don't know. And that's the brilliancy of
point.
what he knows he's doing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you were going to make another connection with the archangel and the connection to Venus and the planet Venus.
because the name of this archangel, Light Bringer, actually refers to the planet Venus. So again, what's the connection? Why Venus? Let's go back to some of the ancient esoteric traditions, let's say starting with Theosophy and continued from the Ascended Masters. They reveal that in the far distant past, certain divine beings from the planet Venus, which is a more highly evolved planet than Earth.
Right.
All planets go through evolution, spiritual development, as do people, as do the sons, daughters of God, the children of God. So Venus now is a more highly evolved planet.
On the higher realms of Venus. Obviously, you look at the planet physically and
right, I'm glad you put that.
There's nothing going on there, right? It's like people be like, I don't think I want to live on Venus.
Right.
It's harsh.
I'm dying of the heat. Please get me out of here quick. But
Right. So we're talking about above. Well, obviously not talking about the physical nor the astral.
No.
But we're talking about the higher realms of the ethereal realms and above.
Yes. Thank you for pointing that out.
Okay.
That's
why I'm here.
Well.
Okay. So
keep it going though. But what went on Venus? What we want to know why Lucifer is now called Lightbringer or called Venus. Well, In the far distant past, divine beings from Venus bestowed mind and intelligence and basically the divine spark to mankind on Earth during the course of their evolution and development. Mm-hmm. So these divine beings from Venus are called Kumaras, youths. This comes from the Sanskrit Kumaras. There are actually 7 Kumaras, but there are many working under them. These Kumaras were working with the evolution of consciousness on Earth and on other planets for basically millions of years.
Right. We're going back millions of years.
We're going back millions of years.
They work with evolutions on various planets.
Yeah.
That's their function.
So Mark Prophet explained, I'm quoting, with the 7 holy Kumaras came also Lucifer, the son of the morning. And when Lucifer came with the Kumaras from Venus, he was acting according to the patterns of divine love.
Now this is extraordinarily important information.
Unquote.
That here is now we're talking about a time where this particular archangel is following the correct patterns of what he was meant to do.
Yes.
And he is following the free will of the Kumaras. And he's like, carrying out what the Kumaras need to have happen on a particular planet.
Yes.
And as all angels should, and as an archangel is the leader of other bands of angels, various legions of angels under that particular archangel, and there's, of course, more than one, they get used to following that particular archangel. And I think a lot of people don't realize that there's a tremendous order and hierarchy in the heaven world. And there are all kinds of situations where you have, a special dispensation come forth, perhaps, and it finally gets to the Kumaras, and the Kumaras are following up on that, and then under them, the archangels are working with their legions, and they're doing exactly what you said.
Yeah.
So you have to keep this in mind that the people working under the archangel are very devoted to that archangel.
Yeah.
And they follow the orders of the archangel.
Yes, they do. We're going to see what happens.
So they're bringing.
So again, he is a light bringer to the earth. Mm-hmm. He's bringing consciousness. He's bringing the divine spark with the Kumaras and other beings called the sons of the divine mind. He's bringing the light of the divine fire with the Kumaras. Now, obviously, as you mentioned, this was way before his defection, before the scene that we just read, where he says, I'm rivaling the... This is way before that, before the epoch known as the fall of man. So what happened? How did he get on earth? What caused his pride? Right. I mean, he's infected. Right. He got infected some way. What, from other beings or some other divinely appointed ruler?
Right. Now we're coming into another tremendous revelation of the teachings of the Ascended Masters on how did this individual get turned, just as we saw in the Anakin Skywalker General Palpatine situation where he's getting turned more by Palpatine.
Yes.
So let's continue with this story here, because this is a very important point.
So the masters have now opened up the Akashic records on this entire scenario about what we're speaking about, Lucifer. So what the masters have shown is that a great and mighty king, this particular king was known as Peshu Alga, Peshualga. He was a great initiate of the wisdom schools of the Great White Brotherhood, who was well acquainted with Archangel Lucifer. But what happened? He failed a major test and took the left-handed path. So, through condemnation and anger, what happened was he went over to the dark side. And that is a phrase that we're using. It's the same as taking the left-handed path and taking the dark side is now a misuse of the light of God, the light of the divine self. Why? Why?
Yeah, what caused?
Why did Peshawalga, this great initiate, and we don't know exactly what planet he was from. However, he started a momentum. So when his son passed away, Peshawalga prayed for him to be restored. When his son was not restored, he becomes angry. He engages in condemnation of the Divine One, of God, and now stands out and accuses God of evil. He says, my son died, you're evil. You allowed that.
See, this is a very difficult test, and it happens today.
Yes,
I think the loss of a child, no matter what age, especially if they're much younger, it's a very, very difficult test. And you can see that, these tests are ongoing, even in the heaven world. And I think that's a misunderstanding where people believe that all of your testings and your initiations only happen here on earth, so that once you get to heaven, it's all over. But the Ascended Masters take the view that spiritual evolution does not end. You're always going to evolve to something other than what you are.
Yes.
And through that evolutionary process, you have free will choices, you have tests, things happen. How do you handle that? How do you react to it? And here we have a situation where we can say that this individual who was a king had a fair amount of attainment, has his son die, and now how is he going to deal with that?
Now, this particular king, first of all, is an initiate. He is not ascended. He did not go through the ascension, and neither did Lucifer. An ascended master has different kind of tests for the expansion of consciousness. They are not tested with, well, my son died.
Yeah. Right.
So we know that Peshawalga was an initiate, but you see, part of that test was to realize, well, what about the continuity of life? If someone passes from the screen of life, there is really no death. That person will come back. It's a matter of surrender to cosmic law, to divine law. But what happened, he just swore vengeance against the entire spiritual hierarchy and his own specific master, his own specific hierarch, and ultimately God and the cosmic beings themselves. He swore vengeance because of this unfortunate situation, which he could have overcome, and then slipped in to what you might say lack of reason or lack of full sanity. You might say that.
Right. Now, the rest of the story is even more incredible, because the next thing that Peshawalga does, he then tries to restore his son by contacting the forces of darkness which already existed. Now, that's a huge statement right there.
Huge statement right there.
So that means he's aware of, he knows where to go.
Yep.
And these forces of darkness were able to use the same light for the dark side for other reasons other than what you would normally use them for.
Yes.
And they're going to try to restore his son. So, I mean, you could see the scene.
Yeah.
Him calling in all of these various individuals who know the black arts. It's exactly like the Star Wars movies and other movies that show that, look, there's a force, there's an energy. You can either use it for the good, or you can use it for the negative.
Yeah.
You can manipulate one's karma. You can change a test where perhaps Peshawalga was supposed to go through this initiation test, well, like we said.
Yeah.
But I can go around it if I call those people I know that can use the force in a slightly different way and perhaps resurrect my son back to life, right?
Yep. Yeah. And of course, that shows you that in the matter universes, which we're now talking about, even though there are many levels of matter, in the matter universes, There is always the decision of free will given to, quote, man, M-A-N, as an archetype and as an evolving being. Free will is always given to man to make a decision, either yes or no. So on various planets, now we're dealing with a tremendous amount of time here. We're going back millions of years for this event, this cosmic event. We don't know how far back it was, but it was millions and millions of years that this took place. So we're not talking about these forces of darkness being angelic in nature, because that didn't quite happen yet, according to our scenario. But we are talking about beings on planets, and of course you can take planet Earth as an example. What choices are the people of planet Earth making? Well, millions of years ago, these individuals that Peshawalga contacted made a choice to misuse the light, and again, the dark side of the Force, where you have the same light, which is blue for the Jedi and which is red for the Sith Lords and so forth. So looking at the same energy, and incidentally, a certain type of red is basically anger, whereas the rose pink is love. So they've already defected. So he goes to the forces, but however, his son was never restored.
Okay.
It was never restored. So Peshawalga knew Lucifer. So he eventually infected the archangel and the legions working under him and serving under him, and they were called Luciferians. But the Akashic records state that these Luciferians at this point started to become competitive.
Amongst themselves?
Amongst themselves. Competitive amongst themselves. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, yeah.
But you see, what does this get back to? This is a delusion due to Maya, that they were separated. The Luciferians believed, because of the Mayic delusion that they were in, that they were separated from God, that they were separated from one another, because there's only one supreme consciousness, if you want to call it Brahman. So everything comes from oneness to individualization, back to oneness again. So you see, this
and that's
was
a
delusion.
particular cycle of evolution.
A
What
Maya
you just
delusion.
stated. The ability to go into denser spheres, or to be able to look at Maya and realize that if I go into that, I'm still not separate.
But you see how strong, when the universe manifests as different individuals, peoples, it's differentiated. You start to believe that, well, here's a separate person, I'm a separate person, Peshawalga is separate, Luciferian angels are separate, and then now you have what the Hindus call, basically, Maya,
Right.
the delusion of a separated self.
Right.
Yes, it's individualized, but not separated.
Right. So to go back to the continuation of the story, you have Peshawalga contacting Lucifer, but like you're saying, there had to be something in Lucifer to even listen to.
Yeah.
What was Peshawalga's beef? What was his issue?
Yeah.
If the sun wasn't restored, wasn't restored, you don't have Lucifer just saying, "Oh well, this is the test of God." There's something in him to go along with and listen to be influenced by.
Yeah.
Peshawalga, whatever else, whatever that story was.
Yes.
So,
as there was something in Anakin that was susceptible
right,
to General Palpatine.
right. It has to do with the individual psychology.
Yeah.
It has to do with many, many things. But again, this is a tremendous revelation, because people think that once you're in heaven, you're sealed, you're safe, you don't have to worry about anything. But I just want to reiterate that that only happens at the point of the ascension, that we'll talk about a little bit more later on. But it's a fusing action whereby you're sealed.
Yes.
And even though you maintain free will and you maintain your individuality, you can no longer fall for the ploy of a Peshawalga and whatever he uses to try to convince someone. It wouldn't work to someone who was sealed through the process of the ascension.
Yes.
And that's an evolutionary stage that one gets to.
Yes.
And then, so we'll talk about that a little bit later, but we can continue now with the story of Lucifer and Peshualga, and so far he's being influenced by him and listening to, and his other angels with him.
And of course, he does listen. He is influenced. And then at that point, Lucifer decides that he's no longer serving man, who's made in the image and likeness of God. So again, when man was created, he was created with the image of the divine Son, in the image of the divine Son. That divine Son has been called the universal mind. It has been called the universal Christ. So at that point, Lucifer said, okay, I want you to worship, make obeisance to the divine image in man, and be a servant of the sons of God, which was all along what Lucifer had previously done. He was involved in the holy evolution of man, made in the image of the divine Son. And later on, Jesus represented that divine Son. Krishna represented that divine Son in embodiment, and you can see what they did to Jesus. It goes back to the refusal to acknowledge this divine image of man that all of us have within us, which when we showed the chart of the presence, we pointed out the middle figure in the chart. That's the higher mind, the divine image, the divine self. That now, going back to millions of years, Lucifer basically rebelled against and say, I will not serve the divine image in man. After all, I was part of the bestowal upon man
Why should I turn
of
around
consciousness
and now have
and
to
light.
Right, and you could see the other angels under him saying, well, now why do I have to, work with that which I helped to evolve? And they're going to be questioning their own judgment, their own job, which that is what they're there for, is to carry out these processes in this long evolution. So this may be a good place to end before we go to our next episode.
Yeah.
And in that next episode,
I think so.
We'll be explaining a little bit more about that divine image that we mentioned and why the angels, were serving and were there to help that divine image.
Yeah.
And we'll go into that in a little more detail. So thank you for watching episode 3, and we will be continuing with episode 4 next time we see you.